start the webinar. It's nice to see so many familiar names amongst the audience. I'm Jesus Mingarro. I'm the sales manager here at Prosperon. I lead the sales team. I have here with me Mark Roberts. Mark, are you with us?
Hi, Amity. Good morning, everyone.
Perfect. Today's webinar is going to be interactive, so we would kindly request that you participate. And the reason why we will be asking these questions is because your response is going to help us steer the sessions and the demo one way or the other. So that when the webinar is over, we make sure that you get as much valuable content as possible. Moving forward, we're gonna launch a quick poll just to understand what sort of audience we have. If you could please vote there. Perfect. So we have around an 80% of the audience that is already using SolarWinds, and therefore you're aware of them. And around 22% that perhaps is not using any tools or may not be even aware of what SolarWinds is. And therefore, we'll spend more time trying to show you how you can use SolarWinds to improve your troubleshooting and root cause analysis issues rather than just going over what SolarWinds is about. A bit of introduction about Prosperon. There's mainly, with the UK leading authority on deploying, tuning, and training users of SolarWinds products, and there's mainly three reasons or categories why you guys engage with us. So on one side, we have customers that are already using SolarWinds. Some of them are new to the tools, and some of them may have been using it for as long as we've been in business. But there's a common denominator there, and it's that pretty much on every single occasion, you guys are looking to improve what you get out of the tool. So you may be looking for ways of optimizing the platform, either based on performance or usability. You could be looking at trying to implement best practices to deploy automation mechanisms, or simply to get assistance with upgrading your modules. Perhaps you may be looking at ways of increasing the efficiency of the tool itself by integrating it with other systems of your ecosystem. On a kind of a second note, we also get engaged, or we're requested to engage before implementation, perhaps when SolarWinds may be evaluated against some other options. This type of users or customers may be looking to understand the implications that implementing a tool like SolarWinds may have. They may be looking for recommendations around the architectural designs, recommendations on planning, and in some scenarios, they may be looking just for a company that can document these processes, from the commercial aspects all the way down to publishing low-level design documents and so on. And finally, some of our customers will also reach out to us for assistance, once the tool is in place. This will include both technical support as well as kind of general advice onto how to achieve certain things, or perhaps to get a second opinion when you guys are considering the strategy of the tool. Now, what backs up our level of service and customer retention is purely our experience. So when Prosperon was founded, SolarWinds had only one product that was NPM, and if my memory serves me well, I think it was NPM version 7. So without going into too much detail, I'm sure that most of you know that SolarWinds has grown astronomically since. They now in NPM version 12.1, and they have around 24 products across the portfolio, plus some minor tools. So Prosperon has been for 11 years solely focused on SolarWinds exclusively. So SolarWinds is all we do. We breathe monitoring and have been engaged with some of the largest deployment of SolarWinds in Europe. Because most of our engineers, well, all of our engineers, to be honest, are SolarWinds certified. And from the screen, you can see that we're pretty much on site one of every 3 days. 3 days, sorry. So we get exposure to highly secure installations, to deployments that are large and small, and pretty much across every vertical. So the thing is, we understand the hurdles that you need to go through, and we understand that most of the times the resources that you have available are always limited. So we're always aiming at engaging with you in the most efficient way possible and keep integrity as the foundation of the engagement. The next screen outlines the added value that is provided when customers renew your annual license, the maintenance with Prosperon. Being support one of the major ones, we complement SolarWinds on support, aiming to reduce the time that it takes for your issues to get resolved. In practical terms, which means is that when you're requesting support to Prosperon, either you'll get a response from us directly, or if the issue itself needs to be escalated to SolarWinds, we'll manage the ticket on your behalf. So it requires less involvement from your side, and obviously you just can concentrate on keeping your business as usual. On top of that, and this is perhaps the most relevant to today's event, is that you get a free health check of your SolarWinds platform. And the reason why I say that is relevant is because perhaps after having performed more than 150 health checks over the last couple of years, we keep seeing the same things over and over. We keep seeing the same gaps. And we're not necessarily talking about how attractive or clever the networks maps that you guys have built are, but rather the fact that the majority of you and are not really using any of the SolarWinds advanced features as well as you could. And in some cases, they are not really used at all. What's even more important about the advanced features is that they could contribute massively in reducing the time that you need to spend managing the SolarWinds platform, either by implementing automation tasks or whenever possible. Mark, obviously you've been engaged on and reviewed pretty much all of these health check document. Would you contribute to that? Is there any particular area that you guys find that repeats over and over and that perhaps users are not really utilizing as much as they could?
I think in general terms, because the application is so powerful, there are so many aspects to it. There are different ways of achieving the same goals. Clearly, there are best practice routes to the solution in terms of its configuration, in terms of its deployment, and ultimately what it gives to a business. So there are things that we see with regards to how data is collected, how it's presented. Clearly, alerting is the number one here. Alerting is the one that hurts people the most. Too much alerts, too much noise, too many false positives. So there are big areas that we can help people tune them down and make them more relevant to them.
Makes perfect sense. Now, since there is a more minority that doesn't have any SolarWinds tools, even though most of you do know what SolarWinds is about, it's probably worth to just quickly go over the three main categories or four main categories within the SolarWinds portfolio. They can be divided in three. Well, applications and systems, to be honest, they go hand by hand, but certainly the network side, and those would include modules such as Network Performance Monitor, NetFlow Traffic Analyzer, or Network Configuration Manager. There are a few more, but those would be by far the three biggest ones. On the system side, we had all the modules that are related to monitor either the application itself or the backend that is delivering that application. So we're talking visibility over the virtual layer, visibility of the servers and applications themselves, visibility at the storage layer, and specific modules, for example, to monitor performance on databases or to monitor websites. And finally, on the right-hand side, we see that they have the security kind of section. Part of this division would be Log and Event Monitor and Patch Manager. Now, we're going to put another poll because today's webinar is pretty much based on two of the main features of SolarWinds, which we will outline in a sec. The answers to these questions are going to help us go or drive you, kind of show you the presentation and focus on specific areas within SolarWinds that are going to perhaps be more relevant to you. So far, 31% never heard of AppStack. Around 60% have heard of AppStack but doesn't use it. 9% use AppStack a little, and then no power users.
Okay, that's interesting. That's something we're going to change today.
Hopefully. Perfect. So let's close the poll. Perfect. So your responses obviously are that you may have heard of AppStack and PerfStack, and to some degree you're aware of what SolarWinds provide, but not really aware of the sort of features or I guess the visibility that you can get by deploying these two elements within SolarWinds. And I guess that to be honest, in order to explain what the AppStack environment is, we should really explain what the application stack is. Mark, so
Yeah, so I'm very much going to concentrate on this when we get into the demo. We want to move off the slides, but clearly what you have here is a solution which runs across multiple Orion applications. You can see on the right-hand side that's the SAM, the Server Application Monitor, the Storage Resource Monitor, Virtualization Manager, Web Performance Monitor, and Database Performance Analyzer all feed their data, all their monitoring data into this central screen. And we'll see how this central screen provides us really well correlated metrics across those applications. And once we have all of those applications populated within here, the correlation between them. And as I say, when we get to the live demo, we'll see that in action and see how simple this is to use. It's really, really not a difficult solution to use, but gives us huge amounts of visibility and power.
So this happens automatically, right? Just by installing the modules that you have, or whatever modules that are AppStack enabled, they are going to be automatically populating this type of map that we have on the picture on the left, correct?
Yeah, so this is a core feature. So whenever you install any of these applications you see on the screen, this feature will be enabled, and it's zero touch. You don't need to configure anything. You can tune it if you need to, but the fundamentals are as soon as you install it and populate your Orion, this screen will just populate with all of these lovely icons. Obviously not the red ones. We don't want the red ones.
Fair enough. Perfect. So I'll leave you to go over that once you go to the demo. The other main feature that also would be kind of highlighted today is PerfStack. PerfStack was released very, very recently. And there's also a few modules that are PerfStack enabled. In a nutshell, what it is just a cross-stack correlation of your data. It's like a dynamic dashboard where you can stack metrics coming from elements that you're monitoring that may or may not be relevant and connected to each other, but certainly can help you when you're doing root cause analysis across different elements. So it not necessarily has to be the application itself. It may be the network that is delivering the service. And as we said, pretty much any element that you have visibility upon. That will also be, I believe, used in the presentation, correct? In the demo?
Oh, yeah, very much so. So we've shown this off at one of our events. It was extremely well received. This was a very new feature at that time because of the release cycle of the application. And what we want to do is reinforce that today. We've already seen from the poll that people aren't using AppStack. Be interested to see the situation with regards to PerfStack usage. And so from that point of view, yeah, the power of this is immense. The power of this to be able to create dynamic charts and have that correlation. See a metric on one part of the chart and see all of the data values underneath it. Taking this data across all of those applications, again, just gives us tremendous insight. So certainly when you're using this, this root cause visibility, and in terms of the demo that we're going to do today, we're going to go through a kind of real world situation, so you can see the quick speed that you can put this together, the speed of being able to identify the root cause, and the importance of being able to share this information.
That's perfect. We're then going to move forward, and I'm going to make you the presenter. I like to remind the audience that you can ask questions at any point in time. We'll certainly have a Q&A session after the demo, but if in the meantime you have any questions, please put them on your chat or raise your hand. The ones that we can answer straight away, we will. The ones that are perhaps relevant and we can bring them into the demo, we'll also do that. So, Mark, I'm going to make you the presenter. Where are you?
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're on to the fun stuff. Sorry, Chus, but now we're going to have a look at the application. We're going to see it in real terms. So what we've done here is we've kind of created, obviously, a demonstration example how we can leverage the two features that we've just talked about, the AppStack and the PerfStack, to get to the heart of our issues. So in this situation, what we have is we've received an alert. We've received an alert to say that the web performance of our SharePoint application is running slowly. And we've got an example here of a dashboard. We've got a scenario here where we can see a number of metrics. Actually, you can see here we've got a number of our Orion applications loaded into the solution here. We're populating and we're bubbling up a number of different information sources. So could this be related to configuration changes? Could this be related to VMware infrastructure? But what we can see here is that we have an alert. Yeah, our technical team were alerted, in this case, nearly 2 hours ago. Why haven't they fixed it yet? We'll have to give them a shove in a moment. And you can see that we've got slow web performance. Yeah, we've got a warning, actually a critical threshold in terms of this icon, that's telling us that we've got a problem with our site. Now, the beauty of Orion, and especially the number of ways that we're collecting data, is there's probably many ways that we can go about this. I could drill into this object and I could navigate through the tiered hierarchy, and I'm going to start off by doing that. In this case, I want to go and confirm what has been alerted upon. In this case, I've got my web performance monitor module of Orion telling me that my web page performance is slow, and I've got 5 pages loaded up in my transaction here, and you can see, yes, indeed, 2 of them are running extremely slowly. And I've also had my users call in, and we've told them, yep, we are aware. We know that the performance of the SharePoint site is slow. We're actively working on it. Please bear with us. And from this point of view, clearly at 25 seconds for a page load time, people are not going to particularly happy and enjoying the experience. Now, as I said, I could start drilling down here. I could start clicking on my SharePoint server from here. I could start going off to my ESXi server. But what I want to make sure here is that I show you the capabilities of our AppStack. On the right-hand side, we've got our mini AppStack. So this is a small detail level view where this is on many pages. This is not going to be on our node details page. This is on our VM details. All the object types that you see here, any of those detail pages, this is going to be displayed. The reason for that is that we have this visibility of an inclusion. So in this case, we're on a transaction page, and we can see the transaction, and we can see the correlation that SolarWinds has done to identify how this web page fits into our service infrastructure, our servers, which servers and hosts. Well, this is great, and I could click off on this, but what I want to do is just take you back up to the top level, the central app stack. The one on the details page, the mini app stack, this one is the full app stack. And this screen here, we have our full infrastructure. Every device, every server, every host, every application from SAM, every transaction from Web Performance Monitor, every database instance from Database Performance Analyzer, data stores, LUNs, volumes, all of these kind of things are all going to populate this screen. And what it's going to do is automatically filter down. We can see the quantity of objects on the right-hand side here. So we can see in total we've got 28 up applications, 7 unknown, 2 in a critical state. And this is related in the fact that I'm seeing this in the display. I can minimize these and I can take focus off if I want. So how we're going to use this in this instance is we want to identify how our web application is working, our SharePoint web application. Now, what we want to think of in this application screen is how the tier hierarchy of this end stack application is working. We have a presentation layer. Our presentation layer here is being monitored by Web Performance Monitor. Underneath that, as I say, there is an application. In terms of our SharePoint, we use IIS, and we also know in terms of SharePoint that this relies on a SQL Server database. I could, on the left-hand side, just create a filter. I could go and find my object. I could say, okay, I want to know where my SharePoint server is. Do a search, add it, and create a filter that way. But actually, there's an easier way. We literally just need to find the issue, and we can see here we've got our SharePoint. I hover over it. It's giving my visibility of what's wrong. And the sub issue is that there are steps with problems. So if I just single click on that, what will happen is we will bring into focus all of the related objects. Now, just to reiterate, SolarWinds is doing this automatically. You do not need to say this is linked to this and this is linked to that. There are a few that you can tune and adjust, but fundamentally, this is all automatic. You can see what's happened is we've got some gray, some washed out icons here, and we've got some full color icons. Well, the full color icons are those related objects. In the top right, I have this spotlight icon. I'm going to click on that, and basically what that does is it throws away all the stuff which is unrelated and brings focus to the items that are related. So now I've got that clarity. Now I can see my topology. my website, my applications. So again here, I've got my SharePoint server, I've got my, what have we got here? SQL server, and here I've got my IS server. Underneath this, I've got my host machines that are providing functionality, and underneath that, I've got the VM host infrastructure. So clearly you can see here we've got one of the servers is being hosted on one ESX host and another is hosted on another. And between them, they're utilizing these data stores. So now we're getting underneath the hood of our infrastructure. We're seeing the performance and the status of the underlying hardware, of the infrastructure. And apologies, the demonstration should have storage on this today, but we had some technical issues in our demo environment. But typically what we'd be seeing here are the LUNs, the pools, the storage arrays that then serve these data stores and carve up. So for example, we might be able to see that there's latency on the read on one of the LUNs, which is causing us problems. So hopefully what you're seeing from this is literally just by clicking on one object that has clearly got a problem with it, we can see how that works. What we could also do here is say, well, I can identify that my SharePoint server has a warning on it. Well, if I click on that, now that's going to bring focus into that server. So is there a noisy neighbor syndrome? Have I got a server that's running on a particular host, which in itself has got kind of shared resource problems? Well, I've clicked on that and you can see that other items have now populated. So again, this is a potential avenue for me to continue clicking down and identifying what I've got. So what I'm going to do here is just double click on this entry. And this takes me through to a Windows node details page. So here we've got the SharePoint server itself.
Now, Mark, sorry for interrupting. Would this be like a default node view that SolarWinds populate automatically, as we do, with network nodes and servers itself and so on?
No, not at all. So when you install Orion, you get a default node details page, and that is shared by switches, routers, firewalls, Linux servers, Windows servers, everything and anything. So a big part of what we do is create custom pages. From this point of view, you can see we've created a custom page because a Windows server clearly is doing specific things. It's a completely different entity to a switch or a router. So yeah, this is a customized page to make sure that the real information is presented in the correct way.
So what would be the main advantage, and how much effort perhaps it would take, just the average user to be able to customize SolarWinds to that degree then?
Well, the two things here are the device, what data are we collecting, what's relevant. On a Windows server, what's it doing, what metrics are important. So we want to make sure that those KPIs, those really important metrics, are presented cleanly. From a Windows server, clearly we've got the correlation to our virtual infrastructure. We also want to make sure that key information is shown in a prominent position. So our alerts are not hidden. Our primary metrics are not hidden at the bottom of the page. If I have to scroll all the way down here and find some information, that's really not an efficient way of my users interacting with the interface. And the other thing is in terms of the roles, who is using this? Because I want to make sure that I present my pages in an applicable way to them.
So what you're saying is that obviously different roles or different type of staff within our organization are going to be having different dashboards, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so in this case, we're doing a Windows node details page. This is focused on a device, a machine type. But our summary pages, they're going to be created and tuned for network users compared to SharePoint admins, compared to DBAs, compared to VM admins, because when they log in, they don't need to see the things which aren't relevant to them. They want to see things which are relevant to them.
Perfect, okay. Thank you.
That's okay. So let's say we clicked on that entry and we allowed us to then drill down and have a look. So I could use this interface to identify some further issues, but what I really want to show you is, and we've logged off, is this PerfStack feature. So from this point of view, I've gone to the home, the performance analysis page. And when you first go there, it asks you if you want to create a new project. Well, You are. You're going to create projects. You're going to create projects in a number of ways. You're going to create a project as we are here and now, in the fact that we've had an alert, we've identified that there are performance issues with our SharePoint server, and so we want to now create a palette, a charting display that's going to allow us to identify where, what, and why. Have we got performance problems? Where are the issues? How is the infrastructure serving that? So I'm going to be going through that and creating that ad hoc. But the great thing about this is that we can create those entries and we can save them. If we've got our SharePoint application, once I've gone through this process, I want to save this because these metrics I'm displaying here, if there are ever SharePoint issues in the future, I can quickly load it. If I want to create a network view and see where all of my utilization is across my WAN, across my infrastructure, then I can create that and I can utilize that very quickly in the future.
What about sharing? Sorry, Matt, once again, what about sharing, once you've created a project or a particular view, especially, I guess, when you're trying to troubleshoot an issue between several teams? Are you able to share this or any progress that you've done here?
Yeah, well, if it's okay, I'll show that towards the end. Once I've built out the palette, you'll see. Actually, what we'll do is, if you keep an eye on the menu, the address at the top here, you'll see as I add entities through this screen, this gets appended, this gets extended. So literally, you just copy and paste that address, and you can share it with your users. So yeah, I say we'll show that in motion later on.
Perfect.
Okay, so the first thing I need to do is add an entity. Now, in this case, I know that this is related to SharePoint Web Performance. And I also know that I'm monitoring that using my Web Performance Monitor. And I want to come down here and choose my SharePoint transaction. So here I've got my SharePoint entry. If you simply just highlight it, what you have then is the metric palette appear. And from this point of view, depending on the object that you're adding and selecting here, will determine what metrics are available for plotting. Now, the thing that I want at the top is my page load time. So I'm going to add my average duration. And what you can see when I move this over to the right-hand side of this, that the icon highlights and turns that green. It's confirming that I'm adding a metric to my chart. And well, okay, so here we can see clearly there is major performance issues. We've got a nice baseline occurring here, and you can see we've got 4,470 milliseconds, so we've got a 4-second average load time. And yet at what, 7:24, 25, we are now in a situation where that's extended to 78 seconds. And in fact, if we go along to the right-hand side, you can see it's gone up to 168 seconds at times. But it is pretty consistent in terms of the performance. Horrendous is the expression here. So what we also want to do here is identify if there are any alerts that correlate to their timing. And yeah, you can see that we've had alerts generated for my SharePoint monitor, and that correlates with the timings that we've got for this issue. Okay, so I've confirmed my understanding. Yeah, I've created a chart here where I can see my page load time. I can correlate that and see that I've got an alert generated. What I now want to start doing is building up this interface because I want to see how this works with regards to all of our other metrics. So for the first thing, yeah, I could come into this add entities link and I could now add, look for my SharePoint server and add some metrics from it. But no, what the easy thing to do here is if I hover over one of my previous added entries, I've got this relationship link. You simply click on that. What that does, it tells Orion, go away and bring in all of the objects that correlate to this. So now you can see with one mouse click, I've got many, many other metrics appearing. So the first thing I want to do is review this and make sure, is it in line with my expectations? Well, yes, it is. I've got my Orion SharePoint server individual page load times. I could, for example, add these to this chart. It's not going to tell me anything more, perhaps, than I already know, so I'm going to leave that one off. I've got my servers, my data stores, my IS application, so SAM metrics here, database performance metrics here, SQL Server, all of these kind of things. And actually what I'm looking at here, I'm seeing, so I haven't got my interfaces. So before I move on any further, I just want to create a relationship from my SharePoint server, just so I can pre-populate and get my interface. What you can also see, actually clicking on that, is that further entries have appeared. I've got my groups now appearing. So I know here that my service groups are potentially available. Okay, so let's start putting some more metrics on here. Let's see how quickly we can build this palette up. So from this point of view, one of the things that could be the causal effect of the problems is the SharePoint server, its overall performance, its resources. So I'm going to drag over my average CPU. And when you do that, when you already have existing charts over there, you will see I have this ability to add a metric to an existing chart, to create a new chart, and I've got a number of options in terms of placement. Now from this, think about the hierarchy of your application. Think about the fact that we want to keep the metrics of the presentation layer at the top, and I can go down and add this as a new chart underneath. Oh well, so straight away we can see we've got poor performance and we've got that exactly timed to high CPU load. So clearly our SharePoint server is under stress. Okay, well let's go and see if we've got any memory issues with this. So I'm going to drag this actually onto the same chart, because these have very distinct correlations between them. And no, we haven't really got any memory changes. There's nothing related to that. And so from this point, obviously, I could go through and create more metrics related to that entry. What I'm actually going to do, I'm thinking here, okay, I know this is a virtual machine. Let me go and have a look and see if this is a noisy neighbor syndrome. Let me see how my ESX server is. So we've already seen that ESX IO4 in this case is our ESX host. And so from here, we've got a number of things that we can show. So what I want to do here is just choose this metric, because from the host statistics, I just want to see if there's any change with the number of virtual machines that are being hosted on here. So that's one of the first things I want to see. Has there been any resource change? No. Okay, so 11 machines are running on there. That's fine. It's not telling me anything. I'm going to take that one off. So let's go and have a look at our underlying resources. So now I've gone back to our node and I'm going to choose the same metrics. I'm going to choose the average CPU load and I want to add it to my existing metric table. Yep, I can see how the total CPU and memory relates from the ESX host. Same kind of thing on memory. Clearly in terms of this, we know that we haven't got a huge amount of difference. And no, I have no distinct correlation. I've literally got high CPU load on my SharePoint server. Now, again, I could come in here and I could start removing some of these. Yeah, if I've added a metric and it doesn't tell me, I can come in and remove it to clean this up. I'm going to keep the rest of them on there because this is evidence for me to pass across to someone further down the line. Okay, so in that process, I've confirmed high CPU load on a server, a guest server, but it doesn't correlate to that on the host itself. This is SharePoint. This runs under IIS. So let's now start looking at whether this is a loading thing. Is it just the fact that I've got a lot of people on my website? So here I've got my App Insight for IIS application. I am going to have a huge number of metrics available. And actually, if you see here, we've got in excess of 400 metrics related to my IIS applications available. Well, clearly this is a demonstration. I'm not going to sit here and put a number of metrics on here. So let's keep it nice and brief. And what you can also see is that I've got a search option. So I'm interested in the connections that are on here. I want to see how much loading there is. So I've done a search, quickly takes me through to those metrics and immediately drag and drop 2 of those items on there. And from this point of view, my connection rate does not correlate to my timings. And now I've started to put multiple charts on here, you can see this correlation view. Yeah, as I move my mouse across a chart point, any chart, all of the metrics are displayed. So I can now see immediately my slow performance, how does that relate? So, yeah, it's 100% CPU. I had 16 connections attempts on there at that time. Yeah, so very quick and easy distinctions. Well, okay, I can rule out the fact that we've got high user counts on this web server. So we know that SQL Server's an issue here. So let's go in and have a look at some SQL Server metrics. So I've selected my SQL Server. You can see again, I've got in excess of 900 metrics now available for me from this. And same ethos, I'm not going to bore you all of these, so let's just put a couple on here just to prove a point. So let's add the buffer cache ratio, and let's add the user connections. Okay, so from a SQL Server perspective, we can see actually the user counts has dropped off. There doesn't seem to be any correlation. In fact, around that time it went up. Okay, so this may be something that I would want to involve the DBA. I'd likely, in this case, add more metrics from my SQL Server palette to correlate and see if there's anything related to any of those metrics. In this case, I've gone through that process and I've excluded the fact that SQL Server is my problem. Now I'm on to my next layer. Okay, so let's have a look and see how the network is performing. So I'm going to go onto my SharePoint server interface. And now you can see, again, a number of metrics here, and I want to have a look at traffic. And from this point of view, I want to have a look at received percent utilization. Now, again, I could scroll through this. I could do that, but no, let's make my life easy. Let's do percent. And I'm going to drag this in one of these charts up here near the top. Because for me, I'm starting to move my metrics down, which are not so relevant, towards the bottom. Yeah, they're not giving me anything new and informative. So I'm keeping this at the top, and you can see here, actually, yes, we've got high transmit utilization appearing at exactly the same point in time that we had page load time. So network congestion. If there's any network engineers, apologies. We are going to blame the network today. So here we can see we've got high utilization, yeah, 70%, 80%, 90%. All of this is causing congestion. Now, for those of you that have NPM, you'll be aware that this is a standard core metric, yeah, high utilization on interface. What's occurring? Well, if you have the NetFlow module, the benefit and beauty of the NetFlow module is it tells you the makeup of this. It tells us how we can identify what is consuming and generating this amount of load. So from this point of view, it could be HTTP traffic, it could be many, many things. So let's look at getting that information on the screen. So I'm going to go back up to my SharePoint node. I'm going to clear that search. And you can see I've got my NetFlow metrics available. So I'm going to have a look and see which are the biggest conversations here. I want to understand from the network traffic perspective, what is consuming that bandwidth. So I'm just going to come down here and choose the total bytes. I'm going to put the big metric on here. And again, I want to correlate this to my network stack, so I'll put that nearby. And here we have a very distinct answer. We can see as we hover over here, on the right-hand side, we have our backup exec traffic protocol is generating, in these timeframes, gigabytes of data transfer. So from this point of view, we've got very clear distinction. You can see all of the peaks and the troughs as we go through here aligned to our utilization. And here's my root cause. Yeah. From this point of view, I would then refer to my backup SME and say, can you investigate this? There's a backup job that's running. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to cross a look at the NetFlow data so we could have a look and see how much and what conversation is occurring. But hopefully what you can see here in terms of this PerfStack is that speed, the efficiency of creating these entries, the ability for us to correlate metrics from many different sources that all relate to each other to determine this root cause. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to take this URL. Yep, so just your previous question. Yep. I can now take this URL and I can email this, I can IM this to my colleagues and say, look, here's the reason for everyone's SharePoint performance issues. Yeah, they literally just click on that link, log into Orion, and they'll get the answers on the screen. We can also save this. So here I'm going to create my SharePoint web performance. I'm going to save it. And you can see actually what happens to the URL up here is that we have a short version. Yeah. So this exactly the same as we just saw with the full long version. We can copy this and we can share this with a colleague, or he can come in here, he can click on load, and he can click on the SharePoint web performance from this menu and see this information immediately.
Because when you share this, imagine that you send me the link and I open it 2 hours from now. The information that I'm going to see is going to be like up to date, or is going to be the information that you gathered 2 hours ago?
Okay, great question. So here we've got a situation where we've done a here and now diagnostic. Okay, we've got this little button here, and you can see we've got the last 12 hours shown. Yeah, that's the default. But you can click on this and you can change that time period. Yeah, so we can have a look at the last 24 hours. So when I click on that, and yeah, you can see actually this seems to be running at the same time every day. Yeah, so have we got a pattern here that is repeating itself, and therefore do we handle this in a particularly different way? In this example, no, we just need to change the timing of the backup job. But in other examples, this could be the evidence to say, look guys, can I have enough time or the resources to go and do a permanent fix on this issue?
Makes sense.
Okay, I'm done, Joseph. Want to take over again?
Absolutely. If you want to make me present once again. Perfect. So I hope you guys find the demo useful. It's now to have a Q&A session. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to post them or type them on your chat box.
So I have one here. There's a question regarding AppStack and kind of NPM data. So predominantly this is custom Polar data. So and there are some other things as well. So yes, that is a known exclusion currently from the AppStack functionality. The version that you're looking at here is very much the first one, the first iteration. It is being extended. Other applications are being added to it, as it actually will do for PerfStack. So more functionality will get applied in future.
So they're going to be extending the functionality of AppStack towards the network, is what you say? I know that we can commit to that, and that's SolarWinds will get annoyed if we share too much information.
No, so obviously in terms of what SolarWinds are doing, they've got Orion as this single platform where multiple applications are feeding into it. So for example, database performance analyzer data is now integrated. We've had the situation where the storage resource monitor was a separate application, is now an Orion application. So as more and more functionality gets added, more and more capabilities across all of these infrastructure types and applications, then more metrics will become available and will be injected and included in these two features.
Makes perfect sense. We have a question from James says, how did you get the NetFlow data in the list? I don't see it on mine. Now, obviously the reasons could be that they are not collecting NetFlow data, correct?
Yeah, so the question there is, do you have the NetFlow module? If you're not seeing it there, then is NetFlow data coming from that device? Have we got NetFlow packets being generated from either that source or to that destination, or from a monitored interface on that infrastructure? So they're the kind of three areas to look at. I don't know if that answers your question.
We have more questions coming on. So one of them is, do you need all the modules to get all this information?
Okay, so as we saw on the slide deck, I don't know if you want to go back to that. So the AppStack, for example, supports data from SAM, from SRM, from DPA, from NetFlow, and from Orion Core. So as long as you've got any of those applications, they will start feeding into them. Obviously, the more modules you have, the richer the data set that you have available.
And do you need to install anything specifically on those servers to get that information? Or?
No. So you install the applications in Orion, obviously the modules, and you populate those modules with, obviously, with terms of things like virtualization manager. You'll add your virtual infrastructure, your Hyper-V or VMware estate, and you'll add your nodes to Orion. You'll add your SAM monitors. You'll add your database performance analyzer metrics, and once you do all of that, it will correlate everything for you. The only one that it doesn't do automatically is the web performance monitor. That is literally the only module that when you create a monitor for it, you just have to say this website runs off of this web server. Okay. Otherwise, it's all automatic synchronization.
Okay. So from a storage up until the top of the stack, automatic, except for the web transaction that you just need to define where is it. Perfect. There's some questions around comparison with other tools like BMC, TrueSight, or HP OVO. There's a very, very broad question. So perhaps what we can do is Jane put something together and send it you. Perhaps you have some indications as to what things are differentiators for each tool, but it really comes down to your environment and your own requirements, to be honest. And I don't think we have more questions. I just wanted to let you know to the audience that when you close and when you leave the GoToWebinar, you're going to be prompted to complete a survey. I know that sometimes they are annoying, so we've decided that for any one of you that actually completes it, the survey, we'll be sending you a goodie bag with some merchandising for SolarWinds. So providing that there are no more questions, thank you guys. Thank you very much, Mark, for today's session. I think it was very, very useful. And for the audience for being present. Thank you very much.